Might help if I turn that on. Good morning. One of the things that fascinates me, and not because I'm by any means smart, but I like to do a lot of self-reflection in my life. And as I think back on the past, one of the things that just absolutely blows my mind over and over and over again is how vastly different my brother and I are. We're cut exactly from the same stock. Yet he is a completely different personality than me. I mean, 100% the opposite of I am outgoing, extroverted, love to be around people, love to talk about what I'm learning, love to share all sorts of things. He's the complete opposite. Introverted, and get this, very technical, absorbs mass amounts of research and things that I just sometimes can't wrap my mind around. Mainly because I don't think I'm that smart, and I don't think I have the capacity to wrap my mind around some of the difficult things that he does. But I also feel like I'm a very practical person. I want to know how to do it. I don't want to just hear the explanation of why it might be good or all the things that go into it or the mathematical equations on how to get the right this or that or the geometry, or I'm just not interested in the technical side of things. I want to know, okay, after all of the technical stuff, give me the practical things what can I do to accomplish this? Show me with your hands how this looks if I do it, if I were just to do it without all the other needless, nuanced stuff. How do I just do it? That's just the kind of person that I am. And when I was first a Christian, I wasn't really interested in the large explanations of different doctrines and the technical things of Greek and Hebrew and how the words came together and the syntax of the words and all of the other stuff that seems to be much more interested by certain people. I just wasn't interested in that. I wanted to know how to live Christianity. I wanted to know how do I do this? You're telling me a bunch of stuff from the pulpit. You're showing me passages of scripture, but tell me how to do it. What does it look like if I live it in real life? And then I discovered the book of James. And it changed the way I looked at Christianity. It changed the way that I looked at how I lived out my faith. I had questions about, well, how do I live like Jesus? How do I interact with people in the church? And it was James that changed my perspective. So over the next several weeks, we're going to be working through the book of James in a series I'm calling Practical Christianity, because I think at times it is very helpful for all of us to know what it looks like when faith is at work. Not just when we're sitting in the pews or we're listening to sermons or we're singing songs, well, all things that are really, really important. But what does it look like to love my neighbor? What do I do when I'm dealing with temptation? How do I guard my speech? I got a big mouth. I say a lot of things I shouldn't say. What do I do about that big mouth of mine? What do I do when I'm in the face of temptation? How do I treat my brothers and sisters? What does God tell me about being present and a part of this thing he calls his body? And James lays that out and gives us practical things that we can do as individuals. Of course, the thing that you have to know about James is that he's writing to a Jewish audience. The word you see in the book of James that says assembly is translated from the Greek word synagogue, right? And James is actually the earliest letter we have of any of the letters that we find in the New Testament. It's written somewhere between 44 and 50 AD. It's the earliest practical things we have for a Christian to live. And James begins the book by talking about trials. And the thing that, we need to understand, I guess the problem for us that we deal with on certain levels, and the thing that whether we would like to recognize it or not, is that there's always something to learn from adversity. And everything we go through and everything we're challenged with and everything that pushes us to be something more, and everything that we deal with, hardships in life and family deaths and broken relationships and all the things that just kind of tend to beat us down, there's always something to learn from those kinds of adversity, because adversity is a teacher. Of all things, adversity, hardship, trials, challenges, they're all teachers. And it's not that we get all of this wisdom from adversity or from a trial, from a challenge. But it's that it teaches us a set of things. It teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us about our spiritual needs. It teaches us about our practical needs. And it helps us to weed out all of the nuances that really don't help us to live a simple and quiet Christian life. But I think the most important thing that adversity gives us is perspective. Adversity shows us what perspective really is. It challenges us to look at the world just a little differently than we would had we never had a problem. Had we never had an instance where we had to fight for something, fight against something, fight because of something. It gives us perspective. And it shows us what it looks like to live practically. So James begins his book by talking about this trial, because this Christianity thing for the Jewish people in the epicenter of Jerusalem is really new. And there's these beginning small but effective Jewish persecutions, as we read about in the book of Acts, that are happening within the city. People are leaving Judaism or what they would perceive to be the right way and beginning to follow Jesus. And because of that, they're facing sorts of persecution. So he begins by this, again, addressing a Jewish audience. James, a bondservant of God, of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad. He's introducing himself to the people. Not only would he not need to do that because they would know who he is, because James was considered a pillar in the church at Jerusalem. Any ancient history you read in the first century Christians, you would know that this is an important apostle in the region of Jerusalem. And as he himself is facing persecution, so are many other new Jewish Christians facing persecution. Whoa, what happened there? Let's rewind that. Just go back up to the, can you do it? Or do I have to do it? Okay. See, now you know what's coming. Don't look. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Shh, don't look. Oh, John actually did it. I was just kidding. It begins with this. Consider it all joy, my brethren. You know what this phrase, I mean, we say consider, right? But this phrase is actually leading your mind to joy, right? Consider it all joy. You have to lead your mind into something when you encounter various trials. Now, here's another interesting thing, and we're going to talk about this over the next few weeks, but this word trial and the word temptation down in verse 13 are actually the same Greek word. So how do we go from trial to temptation? And are trials, the things that we deal with in trials, applicable to temptations? I'm just teasing you. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But that's the thing you have to understand as we move through this. He says, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Anybody ever trained for a marathon? You ever trained for anything in life? You want to accomplish something, you want to go somewhere, you want to become something, you have a goal in your mind for maybe a physical fitness goal, maybe a spiritual goal, maybe something in your mind that you want to accomplish or you want to become. It doesn't just happen overnight. It's training that is involved in gaining that endurance, and you have to go through some hard things. You know, when you're training to go elk hunt at 12,000 feet, well, you know what? When you live at sea level, it's a little hard to train for 12,000 feet. So you have to push a little harder. and you gain that endurance. Here's what James is saying, and what you have to understand. He says, knowing, right? There's an experience here that these people have had, knowing that the testing of your faith has a product. So in the midst of your various trials and struggles and life hardships, this is what we would identify as the testing of your faith, right? How durable is it? How strong is it? Where is it going to bend or break? I mean, you say all sorts of things about what you believe and how faithful you are and what your relationship with God is, but when push comes to shove, is it going to make or break you? And do you really know the answer to that question? Because a lot of times you don't know till you go through some kind of hardship or challenge in your life, some type of adversity. And then he says this, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect. There's that word teleos again, whole, complete, mature. You may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Lacking in nothing. And then he moves to this statement. This is important. I'm going to tie this together, I promise. But if any of you lacks wisdom, Now, why would we have to add this into James' statement here? This is an important question because sometimes I think, well, he's shifting gears. No, he's not shifting gears. He's not shifting gears. In fact, when you go through a trial, you gain a lot of wisdom, don't you? You gain a lot of understanding about yourself. But here's James's point. Not all wisdom comes from all trials. Not all wisdom, not everything you need to know about who you are and all. There is wisdom that comes through experience, and there's wisdom that comes from above. And you need to know the difference. But if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Well, God, I don't understand why I went through this thing, or why this thing was important, or why I had to deal with this, or I don't know how to deal with this group of people, or that thing, or whatever. Or how do I get through this? Let him ask of God, who gives generously, without reproach, and it will be given to him. But don't get your hopes up yet. Just because you ask God for wisdom doesn't mean you're always going to get it. Sometimes you have to take a good hard look at your faith, and this is what he said, but he must ask in faith without any doubting. Do you believe that when you ask God for wisdom that he's going to give it to you? I mean, we could spin this another way and say, be careful when you ask for wisdom, because God will probably throw you a trial or a temptation or some kind of hardship in your life, right? Be careful what you pray for is as important as be careful what you wish for, right? Just like when I wished for a little brother. Enough said. For the one who doubts, look at this, is like the surf of the sea. In your mind, do you have an image of what that looks like? The surf of the sea. Is it controllable, or does it do what it wants when it wants? Is there a way that humans could restrict the seas? It's like the surf, it goes the way it wants, driven and tossed by the wind. What it blows is it happens the way that it happens, to go wherever it wants. The one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. In other words, he can't decide what he wants. Does he really believe? Do you really have that faith that's needed to gain what you ask God for? Why do you expect to receive something God when you doubt that God will give it to you in the first place? It's not a disbelief thing. This is not James speaking to the church about an atheist that meets in their worship assembly. This is James talking about a brother in the midst of the assembly who has doubts that God will give him what he asked for. And sometimes we channel that perspective, right? We channel this perspective of, well, every time I ask God for something, he never gives it to me. In periods like that in your life, well, God never gives me anything. Every time I ask for something, he always does the opposite. And then that sinks into your mind, and you start going, does God really even hear me pray? Maybe I should just do this thing, or maybe I should just be this way. And you start to get on this track, and you start to become double-minded. Well, when I when I need God, I go to God. When I don't need God, I don't go to God. When things are good, everybody's guilty of this. When things are good, unless you've created a amazing habit of prayer and Bible study, which I'm sure some of you have, it is really difficult to go, you know what, I need to pray to God. But guess what? When things are bad, there's nobody I need more in the world. And if I just had that longing for God all of the time, that every second of every hour, I just need to be in the presence of God, and I just need to understand who it is that God is, instead of being this sea driven and tossed by the wind, a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. God never gives me what I ask for, so how do I know he's going to give me this time? I'm going to ask him, but we'll see if he gives it to me. But the brother of humble circumstance. So you see the illustrations he's bringing about. Here's what he's going to do. He's going to talk about the double-minded man. The man who lacks wisdom and wants wisdom and asks of it of God and receives it from God. And the man who is double-minded, who asks of God but doesn't really believe God is going to give him what he wants. And then the rich brother and the poor brother. He's going to move to this idea, because this doesn't just happen to poor people. This doesn't just happen to people who don't have any money. This happens to rich people too. And your response and how you respond to those things is vitally important. And so this is what he draws in when he's talking about trials and temptations and the lack of wisdom. But the brother of humble circumstance is to glory in his high position, and the rich man is to glory in his humiliation. Because like the flowering grass, he will pass away. Doesn't matter. Guess what? The rich man is human too. The rich man needs God too. The rich man might think he has everything in the world. This is the problem we deal with in secularism, and particularly in this region. Well, why do I need God if I have everything I could ever want? I have money, I have a house, I have nice cars, I got a good job, I got stability, I got all the things I could ever want. I got a family, I got a wife, I got all this stuff. Why do I need God if I have everything I could ever want? Why do I need to go to God? The simplistic answer, our good people, is because you're not whole without him. But there's a lot of people in the secular world that don't understand that concept, because they have everything they need. They have everything they could ever want. They live their life for retirement. And at the end of the day, they're just as human as we are. Just as human as I am. It doesn't matter. That's what Paul is saying. Like the flowering grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance, you see what he's illustrating, is destroyed. So the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. And then take a look at this last verse, because this is what brings it all together. This is the verse that ties verse 2 with verse 12. That ties all, puts a nice little bow on the section we just read. It says, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. Not blessed is the rich man, not blessed is the poor man, not blessed is the double-minded man, not blessed is the stable man. Blessed is the man or woman who perseveres under trial, under hardship, adversity, challenge, for once he has been approved, or once he has passed the test. This is the tie. Once he has passed the test. What's the test? The test of your faith in various trials. How breakable is your faith? He will receive the crown of life. Listen to this. Which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Think about that for a moment. If you want one passage to dwell on this week, write this on a note card, on the palm of your hand, on your wrist, whatever you want to do, in the notes in your phone. But this is a verse worth meditating. This is a verse worth thinking upon. because there is a lot of meat here that I could spend probably an hour talking to you about, but I don't think you want to stick around for that long. So we'll keep it short and simple. What he's saying here is simple. The trial, and I'll just show it to you this way. The ability to remain faithful is forged from our challenges or by our challenges. The ability to remain faithful to God, the ability to be a person of faith is not when things are easy, but they are forged by the things that are hard. They give us perspective. And this is really the takeaway for us, the thing we need to understand is that we need to allow our challenges to transform our perspective. Here's what our hardships and trials do for us. When we go through a trial, they prepare us for the next trial. And that next trial prepares us for the next trial. And all the while we're learning something about ourselves, about our need for God, about everything, about our being. We have to allow our challenges, the things that we face, our adversity, to transform our perspective on life and the way that we look at other human beings and the way that we see ourselves in relation to God. But here's a few things. I just want to give you 3 things this morning that this passage, these trials, that this adversity teaches us, because I think they're important. Number 1, they teach us to rely on God. That is probably the most important. If I was to pull one thing out, the most important thing that I've learned through all of the things that I've dealt with and gone through, that my trials have taught me to rely on God. Because when things are good, well, it's a struggle. It's a challenge. Oh, I forgot to pray this morning. Forgot to talk to God, and I forget that. Well, things are good. If that's our only outcome, but in a trial, they teach you to rely on God, and they teach you to go, okay, I need to do that. This needs to be an everyday thing, so that when I'm in the midst of this hardship, I know who I can rely on, and I know who's going to get me through it, and I know who's going to give me the strength to stand. Number 2, they show us what we're capable of handling. They show us our abilities. They reveal something about us, what we're capable of handling, whether it's good, bad, indifferent. Adversity shows us what we're capable of handling. And sometimes it's God teaching us, saying, you said you can't do this, but I'll show you that you can. Sometimes that's the lesson God is trying to get across. Sometimes we need to know what we're capable of doing. There are lots of things early in my ministry I thought I wasn't capable of doing. I thought that's just not who I am. That's just not me. That's just not my personality. That's just not how I'm going to do things. And over time, I learned that ministry, that through all of these things, God has shown me what I'm capable of doing, what the gifts that He has given me make me capable. It's not my gift. It's the gift that God has given me. They make me capable of doing what I'm asked to do in ministry. And the same is true for you. The same is true for your life. You're more capable than you think you are. Number 3, they prepare us for the future. Everything that happens to us in life, and those of you who are much, much older than me know that this is true. Okay? Everything that's happened to you in your life has shaped you into who you are. Right? Every adversity, every good time, every bad time, every challenging thing that you faced in your life, every friend that you've watched die, every parent you've watched pass away, every child you've watched grow up and leave the house. Those are hard things that we deal with in life on some occasions, but they prepare us for the future things that we're going to have to deal with. That in the midst of those times, we learn how to rely on God. And in that, God shows us what we're capable of doing. We're going to pick up right there next week. We're going to talk a little more in depth about temptations and the contrast between trials and temptations, and a little more of the application of what it looks like for us being practical Christians. Because I think it's important we know how to do what we say we know how to do. If you have a need of any kind this morning, or you're bearing a burden that you need to share with the congregation, or maybe it's a personal, private matter I don't know what it is in your life that you need to get off your shoulders, but I really want to encourage you to share that struggle with somebody else, somebody you can trust, somebody you know you love. And if you're on the receiving end of that, job is to listen and ask how you can help. Pray with that person immediately. If you're on the receiving end, make sure that they know that their brethren love and care for them, because that's what we're trying to do here. If you have a need of any kind, you can come forward as we stand and sing.